again. We are ready to go with this week's Twitch stream. Good to see you all again, or I suppose I'm not actually seeing any of you all, so good that you all can see me. Let me post the old note on Twitter. As is my typical policy, I am kind of running behind for my own thing that I've scheduled. But yeah, thank you for joining. Let's see here. Let's get the old stream up right now. You know what I was trying to do? I am streaming live on Twitch. I'm gonna yeah, so what I was sorry, I'm just doing a terrible job with this whole thing, aren't I? I should have done this earlier. But yeah, what I was trying to do was set it up so that I could add the impeachment hearings to my Twitch stream, because, you know, not that, you know, watching me stream on Twitch isn't a useful thing to do, but at least here in the United States of America, impeachment is not all that common of a thing. It's like a big news event, and of course it's happening right during the time when I do my weekly stream at 10 a.m. Don't want to make everything about myself, so I'm not I'm not saying it's a huge problem or anything, but I was gonna do that as sort of like a service to everybody. Have the stream going, but I couldn't figure it out. I couldn't figure out how to get my TV feed that I see on the screen to show up within my Twitch stream, so I kind of gave up on that whole thing. You all don't need to see anything about impeachment anyway. You know, I'm sure you'll read about it in the news. I'll read about it in the news later, and so it'll yeah, I'm sure it'll work itself out okay. But yeah, so welcome. This week, you may have, for those of you that follow me on Twitter, and I'll post a little message in the chat area, my Twitter handle is @BenMiller. So that would be twitter.com/BenMiller. Twitter.com/BenMiller. So yeah, so for, you know, that first one I just noticed, that's going to lead to the @BenMiller that's on Twitch. My Twitch handle is a little bit different. I don't have the @BenMiller handle for Twitch, unfortunately. But yeah, so sorry, just yeah, I really the problem is I don't use my desktop computer regularly enough. And so there's a bunch of junk that I have to clean off, or I guess I don't have to clean off, but it's helping me to be able to clean off before I actually get into it. Okay, there we go. Let's get this week's presentation up. After much delay, hopefully that presentation's gonna come right up for us. All right, beautiful. You obviously can't see it just yet, but trust me, it's on its way. There we go. Okay, now you can see it okay. Wi-Fi streaming with yours truly, Ben Miller. So yeah, this week for the Wi-Fi stream, by special request, we got a request to chat a little bit about gaming. That's what I'm going to talk about today for about the next hour. And by the way, you know, I'm still a little bit new to the Twitch thing. I know I've done like 4 or 5 of these, so I should have figured out the tech side by now. But if the audio isn't great or anything like that, please do feel free to tell me, to kind of let me know, and I'll get that set up in a different way. for those who have been following for multiple episodes, I started off with my beloved headset mic, and then I switched it up to this here kind of podcast mic more, and I like the sound quality on the podcast mic a heck of a lot better. It is a little bit of a newer thing for me. So yeah, again, for today, we are going to talk about gaming, specifically supporting gaming in a Wi-Fi environment. Admittedly, it's a topic that I'm a little bit handicapped with because I stink at gaming. I used to love video games. I remember I bought the original John Madden Football for Sega Genesis. It was either the first day it came out or might have been the first weekend it was out. But yeah, I remember saving up. I'm trying to remember where I was working at that point. I probably would have had a paper route at that point, because if I'm remembering correctly, that was around 1989. And so saved up the old paper route money, bought myself John Madden Football and a Sega Genesis. It was, I remember for sure it was, we got the console, we meaning me and my brother, mostly me because I'm 2 years older than him, so I don't think he was old enough to work. But got the console and got John Madden Football and played that thing like crazy. Used to love video games, never was very good at them. And the fact that I'm not very good at them kind of led to me moving away from playing too many video games. I just don't really play them that much anymore. But gaming is still a topic that I've dealt with. I haven't done a ton of residential consulting, but I have done some consulting on the residential side. I wouldn't say that gaming was a high priority for any of the residential environments that I've been in, but the idea was, we want to support everything in our home or in our kind of area here, and so so gaming was at least part of that. On the enterprise side of things, on the more commercial side of things, we definitely had a number of gaming issues come up. I don't have it on the intro slide anymore, but for about a year, I was working at USC. That's the University of Southern California. That's it's a school just south of downtown LA, a university just south of downtown LA. If I remember correctly, I say we because I'm an alumni of there as well. We have maybe 25,000 total students, somewhere in that neighborhood. I want to say the undergrad population is in the neighborhood of 17,000. I might be off on that a little bit. But the point is that, there's a lot of students. There's a lot of USC-owned housing, on-campus dorms. There's also a bunch of apartments that are mostly occupied by folks who are beyond their first year. Typically, it's like as a freshman, you stay in the dorms, but then once you hit your sophomore year, typically you find folks to room with and get an apartment somewhere. A bunch of apartment buildings that were built by USC, a bunch of apartment buildings that USC acquired and that are now owned by USC. And during my time at USC, we were responsible for all of those. And gaming, especially towards the end of my time there, so my time there was from September of 2018 to September of 2019. Especially during the end of my time there, basically from so school started, if I'm remembering correctly, somewhere around August 26th. I was only at USC for a few weeks after that, but that last month leading up to August 26th. We had a relatively large focus on trying to get gaming working because we got a lot of student complaints about gaming during the previous year, and that was sort of a role that I took on a little bit. I don't know if it was precisely part of my job description or not, but I definitely was kind of a big advocate for the customer, where if we were getting requests or we were getting complaints, I really, really avoided saying no to the customer. It was always more so like, how are we going to figure out a way to get this working? And so for years, the idea at USC was essentially tough luck, that we've built a network, and if someone's video games work on the network, great. If someone's video games don't work on the network, tough luck. And the leadership at the USC IT department was sort of trying to change that, trying to be a little bit more customer centric. And I was definitely one of the more active voices in trying to make that happen. And so I kind of volunteered to do a lot on the gaming. And the reason why I'm giving you this whole backstory is that, realistically, what I find a lot of times when you run into a gaming issue over Wi-Fi, the issue isn't the Wi-Fi. The issue is typically something security related or something network related, even more commonly network related. That's certainly at least what I ran into at USC. We didn't run into a lot of situations where the Wi-Fi was what was causing the problem. And so let me get into it, and let me get into some more detail. So we'll talk about the two distinct environments here. On the left, obviously, you see, well, I shouldn't say it's obvious because my artistic skills may not be the most fantastic in the world, but what this is supposed to be is a nice little home. I forgot about the bay windows on my right-hand window there, so let's kind of fill that in as best I can. And then on the right, this is supposed to be a rendering of a university campus. Here's the quad that our students, walk down. Let's say this is our dorms, and we have the quad as they, go to nice little courtyard area where they can have a meal, go to, maybe a building where there's some classes or professors' offices or whatever it is. But the idea is that these are two very, very, very different environments when it comes to supporting gaming. I'll start off with the residential, and what I've seen on the residential is there are a few things that you can kind of adjust. Gosh, I still forgot to delete this thing from like 2 weeks ago. You can obviously see I'm retaining some slides here as I put together these presentations each week. And I still have that from 2 weeks ago in the lower left there. But yeah, in any case, if you see me looking at my left a little bit, I have a separate screen set up that shows me sort of what you all see. And so I'll try to minimize that as much as I can. But yeah, in any case, when it comes to residential Wi-Fi, there are a few things you can do to optimize the gaming environment. I would definitely say one of the bigger things is just make sure you're using a modern standard. I would say the two modern standards are Wi-Fi 5 and Wi-Fi 6. For those of us who like to use the 802.11 terminology a little bit more, Wi-Fi 5 would be 802.11 AC, Wi-Fi 6 would be 802.11 AX. For those of you who have known me for a number of years, or who follow me on Twitter, or who have met me at Wi-Fi conferences and such, you may kind of be saying to yourself, well, gosh, Ben, that sounds a little bit different than what you've said over the years about these Wi-Fi standards. Because for years and years and years, I would always tell people that Wi-Fi 4, which is 802.11n, is good enough. And I would still say in some ways Wi-Fi 4 is good enough, especially in the enterprise. The typical speeds you'll see, so for example, if you have a MacBook Air, very popular laptop computer, or if you have an iPhone, or if you have any of the modern Android phones, maybe a Samsung phone or maybe a Huawei phone. Here in the United States, we can't easily get beautiful Huawei phones. As you'll see on the next slide, I actually have a Huawei phone, primarily for testing and research purposes. But yeah, if you have any of these types of devices with Wi-Fi 4 with 802.11n, in a typical environment, you're going to get a maximum rate of 144 megabits per second. With Wi-Fi 5 with 802.11 AC in a typical environment, you're going to get a maximum rate of what was the number? 192, I believe it was. Maybe I'm a little bit off on that. I might be a little bit off. Actually, with a lot of devices, it's going to be a maximum of 173 megabits per second, but there may be some more modern devices that would allow you to get up to 192 megabits per second. I believe that's the right number, but it's going to be somewhere around there. The point is, if you look at these numbers, it's definitely an improvement. 173 is higher than 144, or 192 is higher than 144, but I wouldn't say it's particularly dramatic. So if I was kind of analyzing a large-scale enterprise network and someone told me, hey, we have this big 802.11n deployment, this Wi-Fi 4 deployment, we are deciding what to do with it, whether we should rip out all the access points, whether we should plug a few holes here and there and try to just beef things up using what we've got. It's always nice to have newer equipment, but I wouldn't say that I would have a huge urgency in a lot of enterprise environments when it comes to upgrading from Wi-Fi 4 to 5, or 5 to 6 for that matter. But when it comes to residential, the big thing that Wi-Fi 5 offers you is wider channel widths. And even though in the enterprise, typically the recommendation is to use narrower channel widths, the exception to that being with Wi-Fi 6. Those of you that have followed along for some of my streams may remember me, I think it was 2 weeks ago, talking a little bit about Wi-Fi 6 and some of the potential benefits of it. And a big benefit of Wi-Fi 6 is the sort of flexible, or let's call them variable channel widths. That's one of the reasons why I'm very high on Wi-Fi 6 eventually. Why, assuming we get Wi-Fi devices that really take advantage of the OFDMA technology, that's the signature of Wi-Fi 6. This is kind of the big technology. Without OFDMA, I would say Wi-Fi 6 isn't much of an upgrade from Wi-Fi 5, but with OFDMA, the variable channel widths could be a very, very big deal. What I mean by variable channel widths is you configure your wireless infrastructure to use a big wide channel, but then the infrastructure is sort of smart enough to allow narrower channels to be used when necessary. That's kind of the idea, is to split up those big wide channels into narrower transmission bandwidths and potentially improve performance, especially in high occupancy areas, high density areas. So that's more of an enterprise thing. When it comes to residential, we don't worry about the high occupancy so much. We're very unlikely to get 100 or even 50 client devices connected to one wireless access point. And so in the residential environment, we can take advantage of some of the different channel widths. You may be aware that with Wi-Fi 4, we have a 40 megahertz maximum width. And with Wi-Fi 5, we have an 80 megahertz maximum width. And I would say that's the biggest reason why I encourage people who are big into gaming on the residential side to try to make sure they're using Wi-Fi 5 or Wi-Fi 6. Because this 80 megahertz width, and actually with Wi-Fi 5 and Wi-Fi 6, they also support what is sometimes called 160 megahertz channel width. Really what that is just using two 80 megahertz wide channels at the same time. Two 80 megahertz wide channels together. So it's not the traditional bonding of one big monolith, traditional bonding that creates one big monolith. It's creating one 80 megahertz sort of stream, if you will, having another 80 megahertz stream and using them both at the same time using one radio. That's kind of why 160 is a bit of a misnomer. It's not exact. And part of the reason why I say this is your two 80 megahertz channels don't have to be adjacent to one another. For those who are familiar, you may already be aware that a standard Wi-Fi channel, at least going up to Wi-Fi number 5, with Wi-Fi 6, it's a little bit different, but going up to Wi-Fi 5, a standard Wi-Fi channel is 20 megahertz wide. And the channel numbers in the 5 gigahertz band is where modern Wi-Fi exists for the most part. Those channel numbers start at channel number 36. The lowest channel is channel number 36, and they increment in 4s. They increment by 4, so the next channel up is 36, and so on. If you kind of do the math there, then that means I could use channels 36, 40, 44, and 48 to make one big 80 megahertz wide channel. With the so-called 160 megahertz wide channels, I don't have to use channel 52 and so on as my next channel. With the 160 megahertz wide channel, my device could skip all the way up, let's say, to 149 and use 149 plus 153 plus 157 plus 161. So I could use that as one 80 megahertz, use 36 through 48 as another 80 megahertz, and that could be my quote 160 megahertz wide channel. So that's why I say the 160 megahertz width is a bit of a misnomer. In any case, getting back to what I was mentioning before, if you have Wi-Fi 5 or Wi-Fi 6, whether you're going to use 80 megahertz or if you have client devices and you have a wireless router or a wireless modem that supports 160 megahertz widths, you just get these much wider channels, and the benefit of using the wider channel is you just get higher data rates. Just take the example of the 80 megahertz wide channel. I was talking about some of the data rates you'll typically see in a MacBook Air and an iPhone or a Huawei device or whatever the case may be. When going over an 80 megahertz wide channel, those widths can increase dramatically. Over an 80 megahertz wide channel, you're going to see data rates go up to 867 megabits per second. And so notice that's a very big difference. 144, 173 compared to 867. 867 gives you a big boost. If you're curious about what happens with the 40 megahertz wide channels, with Wi-Fi 4, with 802.11n, those allow you to go up to 300 megabits per second using these devices that I was referring to earlier on. So still a very big difference, 300 megabits per second compared to 867. And that's why I say, if you're trying to do Wi-Fi, if you're trying to do gaming, I should say, over Wi-Fi in a residential environment, definitely try to make sure you use these higher rates. That's kind of an important part about it, I would say. Another thing to note about that, I would definitely say that distance is very important. And I would definitely say that walls and other objects are very important. I really find that those two things have become overlooked a little bit in the Wi-Fi world. I would say that if you go back to when I first started in Wi-Fi, I first started working in Wi-Fi in 2003, really got into it more starting in 2004. Back at that time, the idea that you want to be as close as possible to the wireless access point, and you want to have the wireless access point in the room where the client devices are going to be operating, that was sort of a very basic thing. That was a thing that was really emphasized, I would say. Over the years, that's become de-emphasized a little bit. And it's become de-emphasized for good reason in some cases. You don't want to have one access point in every room if you have very, very small rooms. You might have the access points kind of bleeding through walls and causing interference. Having access points as close as possible to client devices also can be very, very expensive. You know, modern access points in many cases cost over $1,000 even for indoor access points. At the very least, enterprise access points are going to cost you several $100s, you know, $600, $700, $800 typically. And that's just the cost of the hardware. There's also running the cable, installing the access points, being able to maintain the access points, having extra access points in reserve. There's sort of the TCO, the total cost of ownership, for having lots and lots and lots of access points so that your client devices can be really, really close to the access point, can get to be a bit of a bear. But for residential Wi-Fi, it is still a good thing to consider. You know, if you do your gaming in an area that's not near where your wireless modem comes into your residence, then if you have the ability to run cable from that modem to the room where you do gaming and then set up a wireless router in the gaming room, that can be very, very helpful. I realize there's a lot of residential Wi-Fi products that offer a mesh solution as well to try to get the wireless router kind of closer to your client devices. I have not tried mesh for residential environments where gaming is a big priority. I'm a huge believer in mesh, and I've set up mesh several times in residential environments for just ordinary Wi-Fi. For people who are looking to use Wi-Fi to watch Netflix and surf the web and do some work, email or instant message or what have you, I think a lot of these mesh systems are absolutely fantastic. The one I always recommend to people, and there may be other good mesh options out there, but the one that I've used that I always recommend to people is Eero, spelled E-E-R-O. Eero, E-E-R-O. I realize I'm running out of space here. I should probably clear this soon. But I'm a big I'm a big fan of Eero. It's just I don't know that I would set it up for gaming, because typically the way these mesh solutions work is they will use the same radio for both the mesh backhaul and the link to the client device. And again, that I have found works fine for Netflix, works fine for web surfing, but those are services where you may not need the lowest latency for it to work. You know, Netflix can buffer a ton of its data before it starts quote unquote streaming for you. It may not be something that's as performance intensive as gaming is. And so I don't know that I would recommend mesh in a residential environment. But yeah, so that's another thing to kind of be aware of, is having a wide channel is great for gaming, but don't forget about distance, don't forget about walls if you are trying to do gaming over Wi-Fi at home. Last little thing I wanted to mention is priority settings. There are wireless routers that do priority settings. Here's a screenshot of the configuration interface for my wireless router. I use the Google Wi-Fi system. I have an older Google Wi-Fi system. So the current Google Wi-Fi system is a mesh system, very, very similar to the Eero product. And again, that was E-E-R-O, since that last slide was so congested. The older system, the one that I use, is called the OnHub. The OnHub is a single wireless router with several directional antennas. For those of you that are familiar with Ruckus Wireless, they used to be a bit of an enterprise wireless player. They're a little bit more on the service provider side now. I would say Ruckus still has sort of an enterprise-esque product, but I wouldn't say Ruckus is a big enterprise player anymore. I would say they're more on the service provider side of things. The idea there with this OnHub, and the OnHub is sort of shaped like a cylinder. So here's my little OnHub cylinder, OnHub. The idea with the OnHub is it has several different antennas. I think there's 12 of them if I remember correctly. There's all these little antennas in here. and these antennas sort of shoot a Wi-Fi signal in different directions. It's actually a great solution for residential. You may have heard me complain about my Google Wi-Fi before, though. The one issue with my Google Wi-Fi is that I'm not able to configure any type of radio frequency settings. The radio frequency settings are all automatically configured by Google's algorithm. And the issue with Google's algorithm is that Google's algorithm can give you a great idea of kind of what's happening in the area near the OnHub, but Google's Wi-Fi settings do not do such a great job of identifying the radio frequency environment near client devices. And so if I use Wi-Fi in certain areas of my home with certain client devices, the OnHub may think that one channel works well when really that channel has some amount of interference in the area near my client. Or the OnHub may think that an 80 megahertz wide channel is okay when really there's neighbors that are interfering with that 80 megahertz wide channel. And so that part about it has been a bit of a bummer. Hasn't been as great a performance booster as I would have hoped. Now, to be clear, I live in an apartment complex. So if you live in a single family residential home where there's more space in between you and your neighbors, then in that case, the Google OnHub may be a great solution. In fact, that's why I started using it, was setting up small business and residential Wi-Fi that was single family homes. And then for the small businesses, they typically had a little bit more space between them and the other tenants of the building. The problem was when I tried to use the Google Wi-Fi here at my place, and then I also tried it at a friend's little retail shop in Manhattan in New York City. In both of those cases, the OnHub did not work as well as I was hoping it to. But yeah, getting back to the point of all this, though, another option to look for is with Google Wi-Fi, and I believe this is the case with some other Wi-Fi products as well, you do have the ability to select a priority device. And in my experience, this helps a ton. On the occasions where I've had some kind of issue where, you know, my Roku device wasn't getting as good a quality viewing as I was hoping, or I think there's this Zip Hopper, I think that's what it is. I have a Dish Network receiver that is connected via Wi-Fi as well for kind of like on-demand movies and such. I have a satellite dish that gives me my television service, but for on-demand, that doesn't come through a satellite. That comes through my internet connection. And so if an on-demand movie isn't loading quickly enough or is having any kind of quality issues, I can log into my wireless router. I can pick one device or another as my priority device. And at least in my experience, that has helped a lot. You know, I don't know all the details of Google's algorithm, but I think what's going on here is essentially, you know, if this is my little OnHub and this is my link out to the internet, you know, basically when data comes in from the internet, whether that's email, whether that's web surfing, whether that's video, whatever it is, then the OnHub will be able to kind of identify and say, hey, this Roku here is the priority device, so let me prioritize that. Let me make sure this video, even if it's not at the front of the queue, kind of gets where it needs to go and gets there quickly. I have not noticed performance issues with non-priority devices. I know that was a natural question that I had, was, well, if I set a priority device, does this mean my other devices are going to have performance issues? I have not had that problem personally. So again, to summarize, so we'll get to the enterprise, you know, the more commercial Wi-Fi stuff in just a moment. But to sort of summarize the residential Wi-Fi part of things, what I would basically say is try to make sure you're using the updated standards, either Wi-Fi 5 or Wi-Fi 6. So that'd be either 802.11ac or 802.11ax. I would say look into using the wider channel, the 80 megahertz wide channel. There can definitely be interference issues if you have neighbors and such. So In some cases, the 80 megahertz wide channel may not be best in a residential environment, but in many cases it is. And so I would say look to that 80 megahertz wide channel, and then the priority settings. Check and see if your wireless router or your wireless modem has a priority setting. That a lot of times can be helpful when it comes to gaming. I also want to share with you here just a little bit. Let me bring up my Wireshark capture here. Sorry, I should have had this prepared, I suppose. Where was that? Gosh, I have so many captures on here. I don't know. I may not be able to find the exact capture I'm looking for. What I was looking for was a capture I did of some video games not that long ago, but I don't think I have that. Or I probably have it, but I don't know if I have it named in a way where I can definitely say that, that's the capture that I'm looking for. But what I can share with you here is a capture that I have of Wi-Fi calling. Wi-Fi calling will show a little bit of the same thing here. Give me just a moment to get that capture set up. Okay, there we go. Just got to share this now on the old Twitch stream. Sorry I didn't have this set up earlier. Need to be more organized on my Wednesdays, but there it is. Okay, so now hopefully you all can see that. So yeah, here's my little capture of Wireshark. Get myself back on the screen here. Maybe move that a little bit so you can see the Wireshark capture a little bit easier. So this is the address, I believe, of my iPhone, if I remember correctly. So this is Wi-Fi calling going to my iPhone, and for this Wi-Fi calling going to my iPhone, if you click on any frame and you open up the header, the header in Wireshark is always going to show the frame type. So where it says here IEEE 802.11 QoS data, QoS data is the frame type. Here's an acknowledgement, IEEE 802.11 acknowledgement. So that's the 802.11 header. That's the Wi-Fi header. Inside this Wi-Fi header is a QoS control field. So that's this QoS control field. And inside the QoS control field, it shows this priority level. Hopefully you all can see that pretty clearly there. Don't know if it's fully coming through there. Here, let me adjust something real quick here. There we go. Sorry about that. So yeah, so hopefully then you can see 802.11 acknowledgement. That is the frame type. Here's some QoS data frame type, 802.11 QoS data. And there we go, priority. And one of the nice things you can do with Wireshark is just right click anything you see inside a frame and apply as column. Hopefully that came through okay for you all. I don't know if you were able to see the little right click and apply as column part of it. But yeah, so once I apply as column, and I don't need power management here. Oh, I already have the priority column. Beautiful. I didn't even need to do that. So yeah, so now it'll show me every single frame and what the priority level was. And it looks like all I have here is best effort. Darn it all. I was hoping to get a capture that would show you. Gosh, I did not get anything that was not QoS there, did I? Yeah, it looks like everything, and I didn't get anything that was not best effort. Is what I mean to say there. Yeah, and these are not data frames; those are action frames. Oh no, I'm sorry; those are not action frames; those are control frames. The NDP announcements; those are part of transmit beamforming, something that's designed to kind of directionalize your signal so that MIMO, multi-user, multiple input, multiple output can be used. That's what those are designed for. And so, yeah, I guess with this capture, I was only... That's a little bit odd there, but I'm only seeing my... I'm only seeing my best effort. I'm not seeing any other type of priority level there. And I'm also, I'm just, sorry, I'm taking a little bit longer on this. I could have sworn I had some other captures, but I guess maybe I don't. Let's see here. Yeah, I might just not have them. There's some additional captures. Now the problem is I'm not 100% sure that that these captures are going to include they're going to include multiple types of QoS. I'll open one up just in case, just to kind of see there. And let's see. There we go. So there you see a little bit of it. There's the voice priority again in the QoS control. So you're at least able to see stuff that's a little bit different. Let's also do the old data filter here. I think if I'm, whoops. WLAN.fc.type equals, I believe it was 2 was data. Yes, 2 is data. So actually there's not much that wasn't best effort in this capture. Just a couple of voice, couple of one video. So not much that wasn't. The point of why I'm going through all this is if you're really into doing gaming at home and you say to yourself, well, I can't really use the whoops, what I do there. In any case, I'll get rid of Wireshark here, get back to the main screen. If you're doing gaming at home and you say to yourself, well, I can't really use the wider channels. Let me get back to the stuff I was talking about. I can't really use the wider channels, or I don't want to upgrade to a newer wireless router that uses Wi-Fi 5 or Wi-Fi 6, or I don't have a router that prioritizes the quality of service that's built into Wi-Fi can often help dramatically. Now, the problem is you may be at the mercy of your developer. So whoever made the game ultimately makes the decision on whether quality of service is going to be included in their video game. But you know, it's something that could potentially help if you have priority built in. If you capture your wireless traffic and you use Wireshark to look at that capture, and if you see higher priority, the 4 priority levels for Wi-Fi QoS, I'll put these here on the screen for you all. The top priority is voice. The second priority is video. Third priority is best effort. That's what we were seeing the most of. and then bottom priority is background. You'll see things like iCloud updates for Apple devices done with background. You get a calendar update or something like that. It'll typically be low priority traffic to get that calendar updated. So that's the type of thing that you might use background. But the point is, if you see any of these top two, if you see voice or video, that can make a real difference in terms of the quality of the application that you're running, in terms of a gaming application, a video application, a voice application. So that's something to kind of keep an eye on. Now, we're only 46 minutes in. I suppose I have a bad habit of doing this, spending too much time on introductory stuff before getting to the meat of of what I wanted to talk about. And so let's talk about the commercial side. And so this is the part where it can be very, very frustrating. And whoops, I forgot to update this. This isn't how it affects coverage and capacity. This is supposed to say what it does. Sorry about that, everybody. But yeah, so when it comes to commercial Wi-Fi, first thing to note is that those priority levels can help a lot. If you are trying to get Wi-Fi set up at a university, like I was, trying to do while I was at USC, or let's say if you work for an organization that manages Wi-Fi at a multi-tenant residential building, an apartment complex, a condo, whatever it is, a hotel. If you're trying to get Wi-Fi working there, if you have support for those different priority levels for the voice and video ahead of the best effort, that can definitely help a lot. However, again, you're a little bit at the mercy of the developer. There may be some cases where you can configure your infrastructure to use a certain priority level. For example, I know that Extreme Networks does this. Extreme Networks, they're now the owners of what used to be Aerohive. And I know that was always a big thing with Aerohive. Again, that's Aerohive or Extreme. With Aerohive or with Extreme Networks, you had the ability to pick out certain applications and assign certain QoS priority levels to them. So that way when an Extreme access point, or what used to be called an Aerohive access point, would see a certain type of data coming through the access point, it could kind of move that data to the front of the line and treat it as voice or treat it as video as it goes across the wireless link. So you may get a little boost there from the 802.11 priority levels, but definitely the things that I found during my time at USC that may have been more likely to cause some issues are the things listed here on this little chart. And definitely the biggest one was lack of universal plug and play. Universal plug and play, or UPnP, is a protocol that allows a application, and oftentimes a video game, to be able to dynamically choose its port for natting. So that way, and what it essentially does is it sort of makes it so that any port is available for natting, so that the application can choose port 654, and then later on the application can choose port 712 or whatever it would be. Choose any kind of TCP or UDP port number when it's running an application and kind of use those different ports. And the big issue there is that enterprise grade routing and switching and firewall equipment does not support UPnP. If you talk to folks, again, I'm more of a Wi-Fi person. At USC, I definitely spend a lot of time working with the networking folks and with the security folks. When I would talk to the networking folks, or when I would talk to the security folks about this issue we were running into with UPnP, the answer that I would typically get was, it's a security issue. Now, I never had that fully defined for me, sort of what is it about UPnP that can potentially make the, create a vulnerability for the network. And in fact, I remember when I was working at USC. There was one undergraduate student who, in his spare time, was trying to be a professional gamer. And so, he would go to class for whatever his major was, come back to the apartment that he was sharing with some roommates, and he would just, play Super Smash Brothers. I remember was the game that he was playing the most. He would play Super Smash Brothers for hours and hours to try to get better at it so he could enter tournaments and, do whatever. Maybe you can tell I'm not a big gamer, so I'm just not totally knowledgeable about what professional gamers do. In any case, we weren't able to allow him to fully use Super Smash Brothers the way he wanted to. It was a UPnP issue, and so the student himself did a lot of research into it and sort of what does UPnP do. And what he was saying, at least, was that the UPnP security issues were a little bit overblown, that there are potential issues with UPnP depending on how it is implemented, but having something, I have a little diagram here. If I have this console and this console is using UPnP, the idea with UPnP is as my console communicates through the AP, through the routing and switching infrastructure, and it gets to my firewall, then this console is going to be able to do NAT over multiple ports. But the key thing that the student was telling me, and again, it's not research that I did firsthand, so there may be some gaps here. But what he was telling me, at least, is that yes, with UPnP, there is a potential vulnerability that some bad actor out here on the internet, some person in some nefarious area of the world. Hold on just a second here. I'm actually going to have to redraw a little bit of that. Got a little warning that came up that I don't want to ignore. Okay, sorry about that. So yeah, you have this gaming device that supports UPnP, a universal plug and play. This device goes through your infrastructure to your firewall. This device uses NAT over many different ports and kind of needs to keep those ports open to allow devices that are coming over an internet connection to kind of hit the firewall and use NAT to be able to communicate with the console. And at least what this student was telling me was, yes, it definitely makes the console vulnerable. However, the console will always use ports that are unused by other devices. So it wasn't like there was a case where you'd have, let's say, someone else's laptop or someone else's smartphone who's connecting to the same access point as this gaming console, using the same routing and switching infrastructure, using the same firewall, and this bad actor over here, this bad actor will kind of use whatever's being done with the UPnP natting to be able to gain access to whichever port number is being used. Let's say this is port X and this is port Y. It's not like the bad actor has access to port X or port Y. It's not like having UPnP running on one device makes it so your other devices are vulnerable. Now, I'm sure there's other aspects to that. The person who was doing all this research is a person who wants UPnP to be allowed. So it's, I would say, natural to think that person might have a little bit of pro UPnP bias, and maybe there's other things to UPnP and security that we're kind of being swept under the rug a little bit. It's not an issue that I know well enough, but I will say, when the student told me this, when the student said, oh, there's a lot of misconceptions about UPnP and how it works with security, I did look into it further, and at least from what I was able to find, I was able to find that it at least appeared to me that the student was being accurate in what he was saying, that there would be a potential risk to the gaming console, but no risk to other devices, that in this case, this is a student housing complex that other students would have on the network by allowing UPnP. But here was the other issue with that. Even if the university would have made the decision to say, oh, UPnP, A-OK, let's allow this gaming to happen, at least according to our security folks, the firewall simply didn't support it. They're just apparently, and again, I don't consider myself a security expert, but enterprise firewalls, modern enterprise firewalls, don't have a little like checkbox that says, oh, allow UPnP to be used and allow this device or that device to be able to use UPnP. It just wasn't something that was allowed. And so that kind of what was a big issue here. So because of that, once I found out from the firewall folks, like, look, even if we wanted to allow UPnP, it's just something that is not available in enterprise class firewalls. If I remember correctly, we were at first using Fortinet firewalls, and then we were using Palo Alto firewalls. So at least in the Fortinet and at least in the Palo Alto firewalls, what I was told was we can't allow UPnP. So even if we would have wanted to use it, it just wouldn't have been available there. So what to do about this? And again, there are other potential issues with gaming in these more commercial environments. You might have some interference. One of the things that can help out if you have an interference issue is to potentially use narrower channels. So even though I said use wider channels at home, using narrower channels in an area like a dormitory at a university, a multi-tenant office or residential building, an apartment complex or a condo complex, something like that. In those areas, you might want to use narrower channels rather than wider channels. And the other sort of potential issue there might be some peer-to-peer blocking. At least at USC, for the complaints that we got for gaming over Wi-Fi, nobody was trying to do LAN gaming. Really, the peer-to-peer blocking had no effect because it was all internet-based gaming. So that was at least what I found. Now, I'm sure other folks may have experienced other things, but when I first started with USC, some of the other folks in the network engineering department, they said, oh, you might get the occasional call. People say their gaming's not working. Just ignore that stuff. We do peer-to-peer blocking. It's part of our policy on our guest Wi-Fi network. We don't allow student gaming consoles on the internal Wi-Fi network. So it's just one of those things you tell the students. And I am maybe a little bit of an inquisitive person. So when I got the first trouble tickets saying, I can't play games on the Wi-Fi network, I called up the students and kind of talked to them about it. And what I found out over and over again from the students I talked to was the perception that the network engineering department had at USC was just totally wrong. The perception that they had is, well, we're doing this peer-to-peer blocking. It's important for security. Students want to do peer-to-peer gaming, and so that's why they're being blocked, so there's nothing we can do about it. When in fact, it had nothing to do with peer-to-peer blocking. All of the gaming, at least for the complaints that I got, and there were several, all of the complaints were all about internet-based gaming. There wasn't anyone saying, hey, I'm trying to do a LAN party or something like that. I'm trying to play games against someone who lives down the hall, and do local gaming of any kind. It was all just my internet connection was being blocked. And again, most of that was UPnP. You might get some interference, you might get some lower speeds, but really it was, for the most part, UPnP. So we did a bunch of research on it. We tried all sorts of different solutions. One of the things that I really tried was VPN. Let me quickly kind of clear this here for you so that I can show you it a little bit more clearly. Whoops, sorry that I didn't do a good job clearing it. Give me just a moment here. So yeah, one of the things that I thought might work is a VPN. The service that I use for VPNs, or that I used for this test, is a service called Ytopia. It's also sometimes called Personal VPN, because that's the address of the Ytopia website, personalvpn.com. In fact, that's what the Ytopia company calls their product, is Personal VPN. And with Personal VPN, my thought was that you could have a device that has a wired connection. So let's say someone in their dorm or in their apartment could plug in their laptop or desktop. So this is going to be my little laptop or desktop. So I plug in my little laptop or desktop. On the laptop or desktop, I run my Ytopia VPN client, going all the way out through the routing and switching infrastructure, all the way through the internet over here to Ytopia. So I have that kind of VPN tunnel going here. VPN, that's what I'm seeing here, is a VPN tunnel. So I have that VPN tunnel. The idea is that Ytopia might not have any restrictions on UPnP. You know, whatever port I'm using would be hidden from my firewall. This VPN tunnel, you know, it's going to encrypt the packet at the IP layer. It's going to you know, do IPsec, or it's going to do OpenVPN or whatever it is, but it's going to encrypt the packet at the IP layer. By encrypting at the IP layer, that keeps the transport layer private. That keeps layer 4 private. So the firewall is going to have no idea what ports are being used. And then the idea was to have the laptop or desktop set up as a wireless access point to use in Windows. You could use the hosted network. That's something that you can set up through the command line. There might even be a more modern way to do that in Windows 10. I remember someone telling me there's an easier way to set up a Windows machine as a wireless access point. And again, you're essentially setting up your laptop as an access point. For Mac OS, you can set up your laptop or desktop as an access point using internet sharing. The way you do that is you go to your preferences. I might as well bring it up here. Well, I'll bring it up afterwards. But you go to your preferences, and inside your preferences, there's sharing preferences. Once you get to your sharing preferences, you can choose internet sharing. You can enable internet sharing, and you can share your internet in a way that you're sort of sharing it from the laptop or desktop's wired network connection to this wireless connection that's being created by your laptop or desktop. And so that was kind of the solution that I was trying. Make it so that this console would have a Wi-Fi connection to the laptop. So this laptop is acting as an access point. This console has a Wi-Fi connection from the console to the laptop or desktop. This VPN would be hiding any kind of port information. And then as long as I had a consistent connection to Ytopia, at least my thought was this would work. At least when I tried it, and man, did I try it in so many different configurations, I could not get this to work. And I don't know what the exact reason is, but I have a feeling what the reason is. And again, I just don't know this 100% for sure, is that with Ytopia, I think I was probably still on a private network. I don't think I was getting a public IP address. And by not getting a public IP address, it was likely leading to the same problems, where I was getting on Ytopia's network, and then on Ytopia's network, there was no UPnP within that network, and thus it wasn't allowing this game to work. It wasn't allowing me to get into one of these gaming rooms. I should also point out that there were a lot of video games that worked just fine at USC. It's just the complaints we got over and over and over again. It was kind of a similar complaint. It was that complaint saying, hey, I can't get into rooms for multiplayer. I'm playing this game where I race around a track with robots, or like the Super Smash Brothers where I fight people using Super Mario Brothers characters, and I can't enter a room where I can find other people to fight or other people to race for a multiplayer game. That I try to enter a room and the other people don't show up who I want to fight, or the other races don't show up, or I try to start a race and I don't see everything the way I'm supposed to see it. Those are the complaints where we had consistently, and again, it was mostly a UP&P issue there. As far as solutions, as far as what we came up with was the idea of either giving public IP addresses to gaming consoles or putting gaming consoles in the DMZ. You know, it was something I would say, and I would, you know, the sort of networking expert, the architect, if you will, the person who architected USC's routing and switching fabric, and not just the fabric, but also the kind of access layer stuff as well. He kind of agreed with me on this, that it really kind of just became an issue of political will. We meaning USC could have given public IP addresses to gaming consoles. USC has a ton of public IP addresses available, you know, as many educational institutions do. We could have put gaming consoles in the DMZ, and you know, I realized that there might be potential security concerns about that, but ultimately, you know, stuff in the DMZ is, you know, it's called the DMZ for a reason. It's stuff that is supposed to be accessible via the internet, and stuff where, you know, there's that amount of risk that goes with allowing that thing to be accessible via the internet. And so we probably could have done those things. It's just we didn't have the political will to do so. The leadership of the IT department, or at least the middle management of the IT department, who is kind of making the decisions on that stuff, they definitely did not like the idea of public IP addresses. It's just the leader there. It was a lady who's kind of been around USC for 40 plus years. She went to USC in the 70s. And she's kind of very, very big on the research mission of the university. And her idea is, you know, when we give public IP addresses to various things, that there really should be an educational or a research purpose for this. And the idea of opening the door to gaming consoles, you know, that just undergraduate students want to have a little bit more fun in the dorms or in their apartment than they would be able to otherwise, was just not something that resonated with her. And so that kind of got shut down. And then this is the one where I'm not sure where it stands, because again, you know, I haven't worked at USC in a couple months, so maybe things have changed. But this one, the DMZ thing, was just trying to get the security folks on board. You know, ultimately the security team was the team that makes the decisions on what's allowed in the DMZ, what's not allowed in the DMZ. They were unaware of this issue before I talked to students and kind of found out what was going on, found out that UP&P was the big, because the security folks were under the impression that peer-to-peer blocking was the problem. And even though peer-to-peer blocking is sort of a security setting, that was a setting that the security team at USC allowed the wireless team to control. So we, the wireless team, were able to make the decision on whether peer-to-peer blocking was allowed, or whether peer-to-peer was allowed, or whether peer-to-peer was blocked over wireless. So that was something that the security team kind of had nothing to do with. And so the security team's assumption was, okay, we get these occasional complaints about gaming not working over Wi-Fi, but that's the wireless team's fault. The wireless team has to be the one to make that decision to allow peer-to-peer or not allow peer-to-peer over wireless devices. But once they found out, once I told the security team, hey, it's not a peer-to-peer thing at all, students don't care about LAN gaming, they just want to get out on the internet, and they need UP&P to be able to access these rooms for multiplayer out on the internet, then that became the security team's decision. And at least as of the time that I was gone from USC, no change had been made there. The security team had still kind of taken the position of, we're not ready to allow gaming consoles in the DMZ. We only have certain things that are currently in the DMZ, and that's kind of the way it was. So, that's kind of those are the things I would recommend people look into. Now, I was told by our routing and switching expert that maybe IP version 6 would be a help with this. I don't know, to be honest with you, what exactly it was about IP version. IP version 6 was kind of looked at as something that would solve a lot of our issues. For example, one big issue we had was allowing guests to use conference room terminals. Man, I spent so many hours on this. It was incredible. So the idea was you walk into a conference room at USC, and if you're connected to the internal USC network, if you're a student, a professor, a staff member, and you have a USC ID, a username and password that USC has given you, then you connect to USC's internal Wi-Fi, and there will be a way to allow you, without too much difficulty, to share what's on your phone or tablet or laptop or whatever device you have in the conference room. So that the conference room screen, the conference room terminal will show whatever presentation or whatever application you want to show on that screen. The issue was with guests who would come into the conference room, people who would connect to the USC guest Wi-Fi network. The conference room sharing just was not possible. There was no way to allow guests to get access. And one of the things that was causing an issue there was restricting multicast over our guest network. That was kind of a big thing there. And the idea was that with IP version 6, multicast is always enabled. So by going to IP version 6, it might have solved this problem just by forcing us to use multicast. That was the other interesting thing is I'm not sure that everybody in the USC IT department understood the difference between multicast and broadcast because we had multicast shut off for, like I said, for the wireless guest network, but certainly when the topic came up, the description that I would get from people of why we had multicast shut off for the guest network was basically a description of broadcast. Oh, someone sends something, that packet goes everywhere on the network. We have a big flat network, so we can't have packets going everywhere. And, my response to that was, well, that is what happens with broadcast. When a broadcast packet is sent, it goes everywhere on the broadcast domain, everywhere within the subnet. But this is multicast. It's not necessarily the case. Multicast packets do not go across the entire subnet. That's just not how multicast works. It is one packet that gets sent to all devices that are running the multicast application, but it's not a huge departure traffic-wise from unicast. And so I think there was maybe a little bit of confusion. I realized maybe 15 years ago, multicast operated a little bit differently than it does today. And maybe 15 years ago, the way multicast operated was a little bit closer to broadcast. But nowadays, I would say multicast definitely operates a lot closer to unicast. And so that was it. But that's a little bit of a non sequitur. The key there is IP version 6 was something that the folks who were working with me on the networking folks and the security folks who were working with me, they were hoping that would help out a lot with our gaming issues. And bottom line is, I wish I could tell you something wireless. I wish I could say, like, this is the wireless setting. Make sure you enable this type of QoS, or that you turn off this data rate or turn on that data rate, or MIMO this or that. But honestly, that was my experience with it, is that it was kind of mostly a wireless issue, and a wired issue, I would say. And it was mostly just an issue of political will. It was just, are people going to be willing to turn on UPnP? So that was at least my experience with it. Hopefully this helps you all out a little bit. I realize that this particular stream has not been the most wireless intensive. We're not talking about protocols and such the way that I sometimes do. I do want to share with you the Apple, the Mac OS sharing settings, just for those of you that may want to try the VPN workaround. Again, I could not get the VPN workaround to work for me. So, I'm not confident that this is an actual solution, but I just, want to at least show you a little bit of what it looks like. So there's my system preferences screen. So yeah, if you're a Mac user, go into the sharing. That's what I'm clicking down there is the is sharing. When you go into sharing, there's this internet sharing option. And the idea there is I would be sharing from the Ethernet connection that I would have to the Wi-Fi connection. When you turn on the Wi-Fi sharing, it allows you to configure the SSID that you want. So what I'm doing there is allowing my laptop or desktop to act as an access point. So I'm allowed to say, here's the SSID that I want to use as my access point. Here's the channel I want to use. And notice there's some 5 gigahertz channels available as well. Or actually, I guess you're not able to see this screen. Sorry. So let me see. Maybe there's give me just a moment here and I'll see if that's a separate thing I need to add here to the old Twitch screen. Give me just a moment. It may not be something that I can add to the Twitch screen, unfortunately. Yeah, sorry about that. It looks like I'm not going to be able to add that. Okay. So in any case, I guess you'll just have to take my word for it. I don't have the ability to fully share this, but when you click Wi-Fi options, you have the ability to set your SSID, you have the ability to set a channel. You also have the ability to set a WPA2 personal passphrase. And, if I were to check this little checkbox here, it would make it so that I am turning my desktop into an access point. So yeah, that's the idea with internet sharing. Again, for Windows, it's a little bit different. It's the hosted network. Let me bring up a little text file here, and I'm not running Windows at the moment, but I can bring up a little text file to kind of show you what I'm talking about here. Let me bring that up here. Take just a moment. Yeah, so everything is in the net shell commands. So you would type in net. You don't actually have to type in the little arrow there. I'm just trying to simulate what you would see. So once you get into the net shell commands, then it's WLAN and then something followed by hosted network. And so, for example, there's set hosted network. Set hosted network allows you to configure the SSID or the WPA2 personal passphrase that you want your laptop or desktop to use when it's acting as an access point. There's start hosted network to make it so the access point becomes active. There is stop hosted network. All sorts of different things that you can do there. And then, the other little thing to note here is in addition, you'll want to go to your network connections, and you'll want to set up your sharing via whatever your internet connection is. And with Windows, you can actually share a Wi-Fi connection via Wi-Fi. So you can be connected via wireless and still have your laptop or desktop act as a wireless access point. What's going to happen there is you'll get different MAC addresses for the client access and for the BSSID, for the 8 access point functions. that your laptop or desktop is doing. So yeah, a couple other little notes there. Okay, that's going to be it for my stream. I really am trying to get these streams down to an hour. I don't know if I'm doing the greatest job with that, but I'm trying. Next week I'll be back, same time, 10 a.m. Pacific time, 8 p.m. Helsinki time for UC, and I guess now several ex-Ekahau folks. I have a major fondness for UC and some of the other Finnish folks I've met, so I always like to give the shout out to Helsinki. But yeah, so I'll be back next Wednesday at 10 a.m. Pacific time. If you have topics you want me to go through, definitely let me know. Next time I am going to make sure I get into a little bit more detail, and next time I'm going to talk a little bit about data rates and a little bit about retries and a little bit about how those things can inform your configuration settings, how you can try to get an idea if maybe your infrastructure configuration settings could be adjusted one way or another, But yeah, thanks for joining as always. And again, if you want to keep in touch with me during the week, again, we do weekly Twitch at 10 a.m. Pacific time. And then otherwise, I'm always available on Twitter at Ben Miller. Heck, I mean, you can even email me if you want to. My email address is ben_miller@icloud.com. Yes, I am one of those, privacy folks who doesn't love the way that Google handles privacy. So I have a Gmail address. You may know, some of you who may know me for a little bit longer time may notice I no longer use I had an old email address, ben@sniffwifi. But Sniff Wi-Fi is tied in with Google. I need to see about trying to get it out of there. But in any case, I've become a little bit maybe too into privacy. Who knows? But I just don't love the idea of using Gmail, and so I'm trying to get away from it. And so Apple is the service that I'm currently using. Who knows? Maybe Apple is, doing just as much spying, as some people call it, as Google is. But that's what I use for now. All right. Thanks again for joining, everybody, and I will see you next week.